Welcome to the 32nd episode of the Student Recap Podcast, Masterful Musicianship 3. Now, to start with, I have Victoria and Raj today with me talking about alternative music. So, to start off with, who are you?
My name is Victoria.
That's it. You're a freshman with me, and we're all in Spanish class, all of us, and we decided to record this podcast because, it's just a very interesting topic. So, why do you like alternative music over other genres?
First of all, I think it's important to define what alternative music is. So, according to the Merriam-Webster, it is music that is produced by performers who are outside the musical mainstream. So, it's just like anything that's not the mainstream, basically. And the term alternative is similarly used to indie, where you can just say alternative rock, alternative pop, and you can just add it to any genre to describe something that's that's a little weirder than the main genre, but not weird enough to be its own subgenre. And I just like it better because it's more unique than just the mainstream. So it's more interesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And so Raj, who are you?
That's a very narrow question to ask, Rafa.
Yes.
But I am, get it, narrow? I am Raj, and I'm a sophomore.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
I'm
So,
pretty cool.
as Victoria explained about how alternative music, it's not necessarily that strange that it's a subgenre or even its own genre, but it's a little bit outside of what normal companies and distributions would consider to be average. And obviously alternative and indie artists aren't in labels most of the time. I know of a few, but I'm not going to name them. Yet, it does really shape the musical identity of the populace, because normal people, even though the radio does play general whatever pop is popular, there are many ways, such as Spotify or other music sharing platforms, most importantly SoundCloud, where independent artists can express themselves. So some of the artists they asked me to bring up for this conversation were McG, Radiohead, and the Marias. So could you each delve into these artists, please?
Okay, well, McGee is, he's an artist from New Jersey. He's sort of gotten big in the last year or so. And he's really interesting because he sort of mixes together a lot of influences from the 80s, and then even modern R&B, Frank Ocean, that kind of thing, and then just does that in a really interesting way, and also plays guitar. I play guitar. He plays guitar in a really interesting sort of way.
So Radiohead, they're a band from the UK. They started making music in the early 90s, but they're they're still kind of making music till today. They have 8 studio albums, or 9, I'm not sure, 8 or 9. And they started off with a really mainstream kind of grunge sound, which was what was mainstream for rock at the time. So a similar sound to Nirvana. And as they progressed in their career, they started getting more electronic and more or less mainstream, I guess you could say.
Yeah, because towards the 2000s there was a shift towards electronic music, so that does make sense.
Yeah.
And then the Marias are a band from LA. They started in the mid 2010s, but they've gotten really big the last year or so with a couple of different singles. They've got a lot of attention in there, sort of indie pop, with alternative influences, but they've also been influenced by people back Radiohead or even Nina Simone and stuff. I think the singer sort of talked about her before. But yeah, they sort of are a very smooth, sort of polished band, and I think very emotional sort of music. The drummer and the lead singer were together for 7 years and then broke up, but they still sort of kept the band together. And so a lot of their music sort of since the breakup is sort of focused on that or like around love and separation, I guess. So.
And I actually wrote down here for my pre-show notes that McGee, some of his songs have like emotional depth, which connects with the romanticism that you mentioned with the Marias, I believe. And going back to what you were talking about, Radiohead, so the guitar really is central to the development of multiple different music genres because it is such a creative instrument per se, because you can get it like into many different tones and genres. Obviously with rock, you can play it in a like let's say more frantic manner and more active manner, but also you can create more romantic tones by playing it differently. So would you agree that the guitar has been instrumental in creating alternative artists and new music genres?
I think so, because a lot of people, they just have an easy access to a guitar, and it's like one of the most used instruments to create music. So if you look at artists like Biba Doobie or Adrian Lenker, who they started off like with a guitar just because they probably had one at home, or it's like an easier instrument to learn as opposed to like I don't know, like
piano.
Yeah, and also it's a melodic instrument, so you can have a song with just a guitar and it'll sound good, and you can't really do that with a rhythmic instrument like a drum set, for example, because you just don't have like a melody to go with. So
yeah, so that kind of goes into music theory, but so with the rhythmic and percussion elements, you really can't have just the percussion unless it's some weird experimental music. I know some people do it, but it's just a very flat bass line. But with guitar, you're able to create many more melodic lines, as you said, and guitar obviously is more accessible because one, it's a simple instrument compared to the trove of wind instruments and brass instruments that are in band that are specific for only certain types of playing music. For example, you wouldn't use a trombone in every single genre of music, but a guitar can be very versatile, as you said. And that accessibility, just hitting more on that. So also like getting it around. So yes, a band can get a piano around, but a guitar, like you can even carry it by yourself. So then that also allows people, just like normal kids like us, let's say if you're really good at guitar, you can go out in the park and play it and maybe earn some money. So like it's portal, not just in the sense that you can play a lot of music, but you can also go out into the world with it and do a lot of things. And I mean, so the Marias, Radiohead, and McGee, they all have different music identities, but definitely the way that they learned music shaped how their music comes out, right? So the previous artists that they follow shape who they become.
Yeah. If you look at, I don't know much about McGee and like the Marias about like how they learn music, but I know that in Radiohead they all went to music school together. So it's also not only following other artists. For example, I know that Radiohead took a lot of inspiration from Jeff Buckley, especially for their second studio album, The Bends. But like they also would have taken a lot of inspiration from their teachers at the music school. So just like, yeah, it's important to have role models to create music that will make an impact.
Yeah, and I think that's...
Sorry. Oh wait, no, yeah, you can go.
Sort of where like guitar comes in, as it's, like you said before, Vicky, such a versatile instrument, and there's so many different ways you can pick up influences in different sort of areas that you can, and facets of music that you can get that influence from, because guitar is such a versatile instrument. It sort of keeps coming back in terms of influences there.
So, yeah, I definitely agree. And also with the music school thing, what many people don't realize is that a lot of artists do go to music school before they start their artistic career. And even though rap is a completely different area of music, the genre of rap, there's so many rappers that went to music school and learned how to write lyrics and all of this stuff, but then people are like, oh no, these guys are just natural at writing bars, but that's not always true. So moving on to my next question, when can alternative music highlight creative artists of which are independent of labels? Because the conglomerization of music within labels such as Sony or
Colombia.
yeah, like Columbia, has made pop music into a very sterile sound. So yeah, like, what do you think about alternative music highlighting creative independence?
Okay, so I think that alternative music doesn't necessarily have to do with a record label. That's more indie or independent, because you have artists like Imagine Dragons who are considered alternative, believe it or not. And then you have artists like Billie Eilish, for example, who's considered indie even though she's signed to a major record label. So I don't think that necessarily has to do with alternative. That's more like an indie thing. But I do agree that like it helps bring out artists more, because what happens with record labels is sometimes they'll have writers. A great example of this is Max Martin, for example, who writes these super generic songs and then sends them to like 7 different artists. So like he'll write a song and send it to like Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Imagine Dragons, and 3, I don't know, just like he can make one song that's like super versatile for all of these different artists to be able to adapt, and that's what some record labels do. And then so if you're independent, you don't really have that, so you can just like express your creativity more, especially because you don't have the pressure from a record label telling you to, oh, you have to make an album that people will like and that is going to be very commercial and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that alternative music is sort of, but there's like I think quite a tight community between artists, especially once they sort of reach a certain level of recognition, and so that sort of allows for different like artists to sort of pull people up. Like sort of as an example of that is like the band Fontaines DC, which are from Ireland, and how they sort of promoted other artists like the Northern Irish band Kneecap. Like they've taken them on tour before and sort of spoken a lot about them, and so that there's I guess there's sort of that ability that alternative music and I guess music that isn't that sort of commercially generated pop, that ability to sort of pull other artists up.
Yeah, and I mean, with you mentioning how even some record labels have people who are considered independent or alternative, that actually brings up one of the artists that I like, 21 Pilots, because most of their music, it isn't like what you would consider to be normal for the mainstream, but eventually they became so popular for the mainstream that their sound, even though it is alternative, they have popularity and they have marketing from their company. So it's important to realize that even though some record labels have just strict written songs and only like commercial pop, that many record labels often have independent artists that perform well. And I think there's like a lot of scouting that goes on in the music world that kind of forgets the alternative side, because yes, you can look for people on America's Got Talent or The Voice, but in like the small clubs where alternative artists play, because most of the time alternative artists don't have that much fame, in those small clubs it's really where true music gets formed. And I mean, many artists, to make good music, they have to have some sort of trauma. I think it hinges on them having a break and then creating some form of art, right?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, to create art, you definitely need like some emotion that's going into it, because if not, it's not art. So that's like a thing that happens with like so-called AI art too. Like, it's not art just because there's no emotion or there's no feeling that's going into it. I don't agree that that's necessarily trauma though. Like you can make music out of happiness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think pain can definitely be a big one. Like Radiohead, for example, they're very like whingy sometimes, and
Could you explain what whingy is?
it's like a bit sort of complainy, but sort of not
whiny?
complainy. Yeah, just whiny, and I think that's like one of those sort of ones. Who else? There's like I'm trying to think of like other artists. Mitski is another one where it's like
Oh yeah, I know Mitski.
yeah, like that.
yeah, and there's a famous quote that Tom York said that like I can't remember it verbatim, but he basically said that. Okay, so a famous quote by Tom York is when he said that, you know you're in trouble when people stop listening to sad music, because music, as many other forms of art, is like a way of expression, and it's somewhere where you can relate yourself to other people. And so you know you're like, there's something wrong if people are just ignoring the fact that they're sad, because it's always important to like embrace your emotions.
Thank you for listening to the 32nd episode of the Student Recap Podcast. It was a pleasure having both of you on the show.